Once upon a time, in a land of rolling meadows, shadowy forests, and glimmering lakes, there lived three brothers who set out to seek their fortunes. The eldest, Hans, was bold and brash, always eager to prove his strength. The second, Karl, was clever but proud, believing himself above others. The youngest, however, was known simply as Simpleton. Quiet and kind, he often bore the brunt of his brothers' teasing, but he never let their mockery harden his heart. One crisp morning, with their father's blessing, the brothers set off on their journey. Hans and Karl walked ahead, laughing and joking, while Simpleton trailed a few steps behind. "Try to keep up, little fool," Hans called over his shoulder, and Karl added with a smirk, "If you're lucky, maybe we'll let you carry our bags." As the sun climbed higher, the brothers entered a dense forest alive with the hum of insects and the chatter of birds. It was here that they stumbled upon an anthill, a bustling little city where tiny creatures scurried to and fro, carrying food and tending to their home. Hans, his face lighting up with mischief, raised his foot to crush it. "Let's smash it and watch the little things scatter," he said with a grin. Before he could strike, Simpleton stepped forward, his arms outstretched protectively. "No, don't harm them. They've done nothing to you," he said firmly. Hans rolled his eyes, muttering about Simpleton's foolishness, but he lowered his foot and walked on. The ants, their tiny black eyes glinting, paused their work to watch Simpleton with silent gratitude as he followed his brothers down the path. A short while later, the brothers came to a shimmering lake, its surface rippling with the soft movements of ducks gliding peacefully through the water. Karl, ever practical, picked up a large stone and said, "We'll need food soon. Let's catch a few for dinner. No one will miss them." He took aim at the nearest duck, but once again Simpleton intervened. "No," he cried. "Let them swim in peace. There's food enough in the world without taking their lives." Karl groaned in frustration, but he let the stone fall from his hand. "You're hopeless," he muttered, trudging off after Hans. The ducks quacked softly, watching Simpleton with curious eyes before disappearing back into the lake's gentle waves. The day wore on, and as the brothers continued their journey, they came upon a hollow tree humming with the sound of bees. The sweet scent of honey filled the air, and Hans licked his lips. "Let's light a fire and smoke them out," he said eagerly. "Think of all the honey we could take." But before he could act, Simpleton stepped in front of the tree. "No," he said. "Don't destroy their home for your greed. They've worked too hard for it." Hans groaned in exasperation, but Karl nudged him and said, "Leave it, brother. Let the fool have his way." With much grumbling, the two brothers moved on, leaving the bees to their work. High above, the queen of the hive emerged and watched Simpleton with a thoughtful hum before retreating back inside. As twilight fell and the forest grew darker, the brothers stumbled upon a grand castle hidden among the trees. Its gates were rusted, its gardens overgrown, and an eerie silence hung in the air. Yet through the dusty windows they could see a faint glow of treasure. Hans and Karl's eyes lit up with greed, and they rushed toward the door. Before they could enter, a deep, disembodied voice echoed from within. "To break the curse that binds this castle," it intoned, "you must complete 3 tasks. Succeed, and the castle's riches shall be yours. Fail, and you shall remain here forever." Hans and Karl, driven by their hunger for wealth, accepted without hesitation. Simpleton, though wary, followed quietly, determined to help however he could. The first task was to gather 1,000 pearls scattered across the mossy forest floor. Hans and Karl charged into the woods, snatching up pearls wherever they saw them, but their impatience soon got the better of them. "This is impossible," Hans growled, throwing a handful of pearls to the ground. "We'll never find them all." Simpleton, undeterred, knelt in the grass and began searching carefully. As he worked, a soft rustling reached his ears. Looking up, he saw the ants he had saved earlier swarming toward him in a tiny black army. "We remember your kindness," said the leader of the ants in a tiny voice. "We will help you." The ants spread out across the forest floor, carrying pearl after pearl to Simpleton's feet. By dusk, the pearls were gathered into a neat pile and the first task was complete. The second task was to retrieve the key to the castle's tower, which had been dropped into the lake. Hans and Karl waded into the water, shivering and complaining, but they soon gave up. Simpleton stood at the water's edge, unsure of what to do. Then with a splash, the ducks he had spared appeared. "We remember your kindness," quacked their leader. "We will find the key for you." The ducks dove beneath the surface and moments later, one emerged with the golden key in its beak. Simpleton took it with a grateful smile, completing the second task. The final task was the hardest: to identify which of the 3 sleeping princesses in the tower was the youngest. The sisters were identical, their faces serene and beautiful, but the youngest had eaten honey before falling under the spell. Simpleton hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. Then a soft buzzing filled the air and the queen of the bees flew into the room. "We remember your kindness," she said. "I will show you the way." The queen landed gently on the lips of one of the princesses, who smelled faintly of honey. Simpleton knelt and touched her hand, and as he did, her eyes fluttered open. The spell was broken. Light flooded the castle and the 2 other princesses awoke as well. The prince of the castle, freed from the curse, thanked Simpleton profusely and offered him riches beyond measure. But Simpleton shook his head. "Forgive my brothers, and that will be reward enough," he said humbly. The youngest princess, touched by his kindness, took his hand. "Stay with me," she said softly. And so, Simpleton and the princess were married in a grand celebration, while Hans and Karl, humbled by their failures, left the castle wiser than before. Simpleton ruled the castle with a kind and gentle heart, proving to all that true strength lies not in power or pride but in compassion and humility. And so they lived happily ever after.